Alice Paul launched a very direct campaign focused on the White House, trying to get Woodrow Wilson to endorse the suffrage movement. When he arrived in Washington in 1913 for his inauguration, he actually asked, "Where are all the people?" And all the people were at the suffrage march.
There are floats and delegations from suffragists all around the nation. It's the largest parade to take to the streets in American history at that point. But the crowd becomes incensed because, of course, good, respectable women don't do this, and the crowd starts attacking the marchers.
If you're a white man susceptible to the appeal of the Klan in the second decade of the 20th century, my God, immigrants are taking my job, Catholics are trying to change my culture, and now women want to vote. What's next? That was the view.
People are sent to the hospital, people have broken bones, and the police turn a blind eye. But Alice Paul keeps up this tactic of direct action. One of the things she does is start stationing picketers outside the White House.
We had quite a long discussion before we decided to start in picket, because when you start, you have to be prepared to carry it through for a long time or it's ineffective.
They had these banners and they would just stand silently outside the White House gates. We now think of this as a familiar tactic. That was brand new.
Alice Paul made a point of having people at every gate of the White House so that the president would have to see them when he came and he went. She was determined to take the fight directly to him.
At first, Woodrow Wilson is cheerfully tolerant of them. Oh, these cute little women, they'll go away after a while. And then winter comes and they're still there. And then summer comes and they're still there. And then World War I breaks out. And you do not picket a wartime president. That is unpatriotic.
I was called up by this Major Sylvester, and he said that they had decided that they could not permit the picketing any longer in view of the war and so on. He wanted to warn us that if anybody did go out again on the picket line, it would be their duty to arrest us.
The problem is they are not breaking any laws, so they trump up a reason to arrest them. They say that they have obstructed traffic, and they start to round up these women, throw them into paddy wagons, and assume they'll go away. They go to court, they refuse to pay their court fines, they go to the workhouse. More women show up. They throw them in paddy wagons, they go to the workhouse. So you start to have a huge crop of political prisoners in Occoquan workhouse.
So it was really a big turning point, but that's when our militancy really began.
There were hunger strikes in prison. They were willing to risk everything.
The prison staff thought they could stop this hunger strike by force-feeding these women. They would put them in chairs and literally strap them in. And then you would have a tube forced down your throat. And then they would put a funnel at the top of the tube and they would whip up eggs or whatever it might be, and then they would just pour it into the funnel and it would come down. The women would vomit. They had bloody noses routinely.
I still today don't know much about food, or think much about it, or care much about it.
Alice Paul had stomach problems for the rest of her life. But the National Woman's Party knows what's going on inside the prison, right? And they start publicizing what's happening. And this creates a great deal of sympathy in the American public because it was so brutal. But really, it's a million things over time that eventually tip the scales. A bunch of suffragists go state by state and get mail taken out of the Constitution. That is a dual strategy, working at the state level and working at the federal level. You've got two branches of the movement. The state movement starts to win a lot of victories. States out west and states in other places start enfranchising women and allowing them access to the ballot. It started to have a kind of insurmountable momentum to it that I think Wilson eventually joined.
Wilson gave the impression of being very scholarly, very tolerant, and very respectful. One thing he was always saying is you'll have to consult public opinion to get enough public opinion in the country back of this.
In 1918, Congress takes up a vote, and it narrowly fails. And what the National Woman's Party decide is they're going to go to those states, to those legislators who voted against, and they're going to try to get them out of office. And by 1919, they've gotten a lot of those men out of office. They take a second vote in the House and the Senate, and it passes both.
Change in America comes when the powerful take notice of what the people have been saying. And when those two things intersect, that's how history is made.
But the thing that we can't forget is that while this suffrage story is unfolding, there is simultaneously a suppression of democracy going on in the United States. During that massive 1913 suffrage parade, the great Ida B. Wells, journalist, anti-lynching crusader, feminist activist, comes in with her Illinois delegation from Chicago. But they're in D.C., which is a southern city, and there are going to be southern congresspeople watching this. And so Alice Paul says, no, we can't have you march with white women. And that's one example of the ways in which Alice Paul was willing to embrace and perpetuate racism in the service of the movement. And I think the suffrage movement reminds us that we really have to be thinking constantly about the ways in which justice movements can do damage while they're also doing good. And I think that's a caution to us today because we're no different.